Fernando, welcome to Tambora Dialogues.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me aboard, and it's a really pleasure and honor to be in Tambora Dialogues from Santo Domingo for you and your audience.
Thank you. We're so excited to share with our audience all about your work promoting jazz here in the Dominican Republic. But to begin, we here at Tambora believe that the personal is political. So I'll start off by asking you your view. How do you view your work in the promotion of jazz as a genre and jazz by Dominicans here on the island in particular as having a political effect?
Well, that's a hard one because usually you try and not do cultural with politics, but they are involved with each other. Jazz as a whole, worldwide, and the reason why International Jazz Day was born, and it's being celebrated on the 30th of April of every year since 2012. It's because jazz as a genre, jazz as a way of living, jazz as a way of expressing yourself, promotes freedom and promotes the intercultural dialogue of nations. Because of that, jazz becomes a political force in unifying people, in breaking down walls, in making sure that folks are able to express themselves in an open fashion, regardless of their age or their creed or their political affiliation or their color or where they come from. So that's one of the things why I've always loved jazz, but once I became more in tune with what jazz could be used as a tool for freedom, as a tool for expression of the liberties that we all should have, as a tool of promoting unity amongst all, regardless of race, creed, or color. I think it became more in me to be able to continue and feed my appetite for what I'm doing on a daily basis.
Thank you. You know, I remember hearing this quote some time ago. I think Nina Simone said it, that, you know, she was classically trained, right, in music. And, you know, there's rigidity and limitations to classical music. And there was something that was so liberating about jazz, and jazz to her was, or is like, Black people's classical music. So there was like this freedom of improvisation and just like, you know, just going with what you feel, something that very oftentimes was like stomped on by society. And so I see what you're saying and I feel what you're saying, because that's very much of, you know, how I feel jazz. I feel it in like all parts of my body. My hair tingles, I feel it in my toes, you know, so it's really amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And one of the things that's happening today, maybe I'm getting ahead, is that jazz over the last maybe 12-year period, every day new pages are being written, and the lexicon of jazz, or the language of jazz, grows as it is being mixed or infused with folkloric rhythm from nations that are not traditional to jazz, such as Latin America, Dominican Republic, such as there's been an influx of Africa for quite some time, but now there's an influx coming out of the Middle East and the Far East that's creating new idioms and making the jazz language richer. And at the end of the day, what is it? It's cultures coming together and enriching an already excellent form of art, which is jazz.
Yeah, we will definitely go deeper into that. If I can just go back a little bit to like, you know, something that you said a while ago, that, you know, you see jazz as like a unifying force, and something that you just mentioned now. Can you give us an example of like how you have seen that happening personally, whether it's been here in the Dominican Republic or, you know, elsewhere?
Well, I mean, elsewhere it's always been happening, which is why International Jazz Day is so important. But to give you an example, because of the fact that here in the Dominican Republic, I've been able to present over the years musicians and artists from Haiti, from Mexico, from Puerto Rico, France, Italy, even Russia. Last year, I was able to bring in from Ecuador and the United States. So due to the fact that you're able to bring in musicians from other cultures and play along with musicians from the Dominican Republic, that in itself starts to enable bridges to be built amongst people. And people are the most common denominator of a race or a culture. So when you've got at the UNFU school, when you've got 3 students coming every year from Germany and 2 from Denmark, but you're having 3 going Dominicans, 3 going to Germany and 2 going to Denmark, that cultural interchange starts making the people in Hamburg know what's happening in the Dominican Republic, and Dominicans know what's happening in Denmark or in Hamburg. All of a sudden, you've got a bridge. It's only 5 people, but those 5 people are turning on what they're learning and what they're living to their classmates. So all of a sudden, you're hitting up 30 to 60 to 90 to 120 people. Now, when all of those come together and do a concert before 500 people or 1,000 people, and they actually are saying, we're doing this together because we've been together for a while and we're able to bridge our cultures via the music, then all of a sudden you're hitting up 500, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 people. When that gets on TV or one of my YouTube jazz shows, which I'll talk about what I'm doing with the New Orleans Jazz Museum for International Jazz Day, all of a sudden, the amount of people that can go and see and get into that, you've got over 100,000, 200,000, depending on what the views are. And all of a sudden, you're saying, yes, if they can come together because of music, why can't we come together because of our cultural or political differences? And I think at the end of the day, that bridge that I've been talking about is so important. And we only need to have one person's open themselves up and say yes.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned kind of like the Dominican jazz. Can you talk about like what are some of the unique cultural traits that you feel Dominican musicians bring to the genre of jazz?
Sure. I've always said that we have an advantage compared to the regular jazz musician, let's say from the States. What is it? Well, we can play jazz the same as they can play jazz, but then we can play our cultural rhythms, which they cannot. For instance, the jaleo, which is what's called for the saxophone on the merengue, an American jazz player would have to come to the Dominican Republic and spend at least 6 months playing on a daily basis with merengue saxophone players to get that. Well, our guy is basically born with that and installed in his blood. So when we make merengue jazz, it's merengue being jazzed up or jazz being merengued up. We can do that immediately because we can already dominate those different folkloric rhythms. And the same can be said whether we're doing the repique of the guira on a drum set or doing the tambora drums on a drum set. That gives us an advantage. So when we're making fusions of our folkloric historic heritage that we have, it really brings jazz to another level on our side. Now, it's something that's been going on for a while here in the Dominican Republic, but according to the UNESCO, not counting Brazil, the Dominican Republic has the most African-based folkloric rhythms in the world. I mean, in this side of the world. So last time, I think when they did the investigation, it was like 105 distinct rhythms. Quite a few of those are no longer alive. Like Machaco is no longer alive. It's not played anywhere because it's died out due to the Indians dying out, obviously. But these rhythms are being incorporated into jazz on a very active basis by a lot of Dominican jazz groups, starting with a few that started in the 80s, but recently in the last 10 to 12 year period, it's more pronounced. And it's making it so that I can actually go out and say, do you like bachata? Yeah, well, this bachata jazz. And the people are going like, what? Do you like sarandunga? Yeah, well, this sarandunga jazz.
Yeah.
So Dominican Republic now, and I wrote an article about it, it's no longer just the land of beaches, bachatas, and merengues. There's a very good jazz that's coming out. And that's what I try and promote and say on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I really love that. And I got a little glimpse of that, a little taste of that when I went to see some performances with some of the UNFU students, which, by the way, as I was sharing with you off camera, it's the first time that like I mentioned, I'm a jazz connoisseur when I was living in the States. And so it was really something really special for me to be in the room and seeing these young, people from the university, the UNFU University, come in and showcase their work and highlight their work and do exactly what you just mentioned. Take a song, there was a bolero, right? And turn it into this beautiful jazz piece. It was really thrilling. So congratulations to you for, highlighting that talent and for really nurturing all of that uniqueness.
When I started my first events back in September of 2007, the part of the goal or objective was to, it was kind of like a double prong. It was to give stage presence to young musicians. A lot of them would go and play with older musicians, so it served to them. One is getting experience playing with older musicians and getting the experience that they need to hone their craft, but also they were playing in front of, instead of playing in front of their family or other students, they were playing in front of a live audience. Obviously, to them, they didn't know it, but it was, for them, it was good because it was already an audience that was a jazz loving or a music loving audience. So obviously they were playing to like their audience. They weren't playing to a negative audience or an audience that was actually being critical of what they were doing. But at the same time, it gave that same audience the opportunity to see what's coming up in jazz or in popular music in the Dominican Republic. Not every one of those students that you saw at UNFU playing at Fiesta the other day, not all of them will end up in music. Obviously, not all of them will end up in jazz, but you might have there a couple of them that go into musical theater or into singing pop music, popular music, and maybe some will just, become a teacher or whatever. But at least, somebody in that audience 2-3 years down the road might be at a concert and go, oh, I saw that guy playing saxophone at Fiesta. So that's the idea behind that.
Yeah, I think I think it's phenomenal. I really loved it and enjoyed it. Can you tell us a little bit about, who are some of your favorite jazz musicians to come out of the Dominican Republic? And what were their particular, trajectories to become jazz musicians?
If I start doing that, I'm going to get in trouble because there's so many. But let me just give a few.
Just a little sprinkling. We know that there are many.
There are.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I always refuse kind of like to give out names is because if I leave somebody out, I'm going to get in deep. So anyway, but basically, let's go into some of the names that people should kind of like know a little bit.
Yeah.
There's, to me, one of the top is Mario Rivera. And Mario Rivera was known as a saxophone player, but he played 22 different instruments. And Mario Rivera, when he moved from the Dominican Republic to New York, in New York, he started playing with the A-list who's who of jazz of all time: regular jazz, Latin jazz, and salsa. So he played with the United Nations All-Star Big Band with Dizzy Gillespie, or he played with the O'Farrell brothers, father and son. In salsa, he created the Salsa Refugees. And what was the other one? Latina 73. Anyway, that was like in salsa. And he had his own band, and he only did one record of his own, which is called the Merengue Jazz. But he was he was one of the most important recording artists of jazz of all time. He recorded in over 800 different jazz albums of different jazz artists of renowned fame in the United States. So he would be somebody that any Dominican jazz player should be, one, know of his music, and two, be very proud of him. Tavito Vasquez, and Mario passed away. Tavito Vasquez is another saxophone player, and he's also passed away. He was referred to as the Dominican Charlie Parker. He, as a merengue artist, would do free phrasing before he even knew what jazz was about. So when he found out what jazz was about, he found an out for his inklings in merengue and being able to free phrase merengue. So he was already doing jazz without really knowing what it was. So that's another one of the jazz artists, which is more difficult to get the material, but that we also have to be very proud of. Obviously, Michel Camilo, pianist, he is our jazz ambassador outside of the Dominican Republic. But here in the Dominican Republic, whether you're talking about Rafaelito Mirabal, pianist in Santiago, Sandy Gabriel, saxophone player from Santo Domingo, Carlos Marcelo, a piano player from La Romana and Punta Cana, to the young artists that are starting to make themselves known today. You have to really be proud of them, because these are people that are swimming against the current. Jazz is not a popular musical alternative, and these guys are making it so that jazz is their north, and that's where they're going after. The making of jazz recordings is very difficult because of lack of sponsorships. So these guys are basically recording self-penned or self-backed, and it becomes an expensive proposition, yet they're doing it so that people can listen to their music, so that there becomes a paper trail via having a CD out or whatever. So in each different instrument, there's names that I can give you for each one. Guy Framata on the drums, to Alex Diaz on percussion, but to name all of them would really become hard to do, and to me, hard to be even keeled because, you know, I should never talk more about this one than that one in my role to try and be supportive of the dissemination of jazz in the Dominican Republic and Dominican jazz abroad.
Yeah, no, but I definitely appreciate kind of like that the history that you just shared with us, because you know, these are names that I hadn't necessarily heard myself. And so, you know, thank you for sharing that, because now there's going to be a broader audience that will be able to like look these folks up. And as you say, bask in the joy of knowing that, you know, there has been a longer term Dominican influence in jazz that maybe we weren't aware of, and that should be celebrated. So thank you for sharing that. You know, it seems like your knowledge of jazz is deeply rooted, right? So can you share with our audience, like, how did that evolve? How did that develop? How was your love of jazz born, so to speak?
Well, it all goes back to when I was a kid, growing up. In my house, my dad would be listening to big band, jazz big band, Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, and that.
Yeah.
My mom would be the ballads. So in her ballads, one of her favorite was Nat King Cole, which was obviously in English. So I was exposed to that as a really young kid. Growing up in New York, obviously in school I would be more into some rocks, funk, R&B, but I'm talking about the 60s. It was like the early stuff, soul music. So when I got to college in 1974, I had all of these musical interests running around, obviously. And I remember it was like in October of 74, my roommate gave me an album which is called Sunflower by the Milt Jackson Quintet. So I played it on the record player, and like 17 times in a row that night, I scratched the record. I mean, I fell in love with it. So the very next day I went out and bought two because I knew I was going to scratch another one. So that one I recorded it into a cassette. Remember back then was cassettes.
Yeah.
And the second one, I kept it in its original sleeve just to have it. And I always say that that's the album that threw me into the deep end of jazz, into the deep end of the pool of jazz. I started listening more. I started reading more. I started going to jazz events in the States. And so that was kind of like where it all started, where it came from. But then, you know, life takes you to other places, and it stayed dormant for quite some time until I was able to, in 2006, due to being ticked off at a jazz event that I was invited to, I started Jazz and Dominicana.
Yeah. So
But it was
good. Were you going to share something else?
no, I said, but it was there. I mean,
It was there.
Even though it was dormant, it was there. I never stopped listening to jazz during the time between the mid 70s and late 70s until today.
Okay. And so you're hosting, you know, this phenomenal, you know, jazz night, jazz evening in Dominican Fiesta. And you're also like a blogger, like you published like over 2,000 articles and interviews. Your blog is called Jazz and Dominicana.
Yeah, everything's called jazz. Everything I do has been since the initially was called Jazz and Dominicana. How that started was in September of 2006, I was invited to a jazz concert. So I get there, sit down in the middle, grab a beer, and nobody went. It was like there's nobody there. And the musicians, which were friends of mine, they said, "Don't go." And they played the two sets as if the place was jam-packed for me only. So when I got home that night, I felt really good because it was really a good concert. But I felt really bad because there's nobody there. So I wrote an email to a few friends telling them what I had witnessed the night before. And my education is so that I CC'd all of the jazz musicians and the owner of the event. So the next morning they go, how the hell in 2 paragraphs did you capture everything that we did last night so well? So I said, well, I don't know. That's what came out. So the next week, there was 3 of us there. So again, it was the same. They didn't cancel. It was really good. So I said, well, let me write to more people instead of just a couple. So I remember back then it was Outlook. So I took the Outlook calendar and I just threw it all out there. The owner of the event called me if he could use that article, that email article that I wrote, and send it to the press. And I said, sure. And it got published in 3 of the local press as a press release kind of thing. And so the next Monday, it was full. Now, I've never wanted to know, take credit or whatever, why it was full, but it was full and it stayed full for a while. When you're either a musician or a jazz lover, you don't want to go to see a jazz show or play at a jazz show with no audience because, it gets lost. Right. Obviously, in me, it irked me to write about it. And so I remember it was like now, on Monday, October the 22nd of 2006, the band said, why don't you just stop writing emails from time to time and set up a web page or a blog or whatever to make your writings go to a larger audience. So I remember my nephew lived in Spain and he was a blogger. So I hit him up with Hotmail Messenger. That's what was available. And I said, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning here. And so I said, can you help me put together a blog? And he said, sure. So we got together and at 3:30 more or less in the morning, now it's October 23rd, Jazz and Dominicano was born. And so my idea of the blog was to make it a page that would inform about all the jazz that was being made in the Dominican Republic by Dominican musicians and all the jazz that was being made in the Dominican Republic by musicians from abroad. Because back in those days, we used to have jazz shows being done by artists that were being brought in by the US Embassy, by the Japanese Embassy, by the French Embassy. So I started writing about them and publishing them on the page. And also on the page, there was kind of like, when you hit up the, what did they call it in English? Cartelera de películas, where you see what movies are being done and where. So it was like, it would show what jazz was available, which day of the week and where, so that people could actually be informed about it. So all of a sudden I start getting invited by all of these people that are doing jazz events, whether they be the Casa de Teatro Jazz Festival, Freddy Ginebra, whether it be the Punta Cana Bávaro Jazz Festival, whether it be one of the embassies that I previously mentioned, because I was becoming the only person to 100% write about jazz. And because of my style of writing, which was kind of like pictorial, if I wrote a jazz review of a show, people that went could actually relive it, and people that didn't go could almost actually listen to it through my word.
Yeah.
So I discovered without meaning to that I had that style of writing, and I've kept it. So one thing led to another, and I've never stopped writing. I've never wanted to stop writing because I found that I need to, first of all, I like writing. So it's like I need to express myself when I write. But then, even though there is no history of jazz in the Dominican Republic, because up until I started writing, jazz was like a kind of like a mouth to mouth kind of thing. So it was like being passed on from one to another. Nothing really was written. So I said, okay, I'm not going to write the history of jazz in the Dominican Republic, but I'm going to leave a I'm going to leave a page where people can actually see what's happening. Not 100% of the jazz, because I've never said that I do 100% of the jazz that's being done, but it's a very high percentage of the jazz being done in the Dominican Republic that I've been able to write about. So now there's over 2,300, and I guess I'm closing in on 2,400 articles.
That's amazing.
And I keep writing about everything that's being done. I've also been, writing about different jazz artists and what they're doing abroad. Over the years, my original thing was to become kind of like a jazz reporter.
Mm.
1 year later, due to Freddy Ginebra asking me to do like a weekly event. So all of a sudden, I'm a jazz writer. I'm also a jazz promoter and a jazz producer. And I've done over 1,450 events in the last 16 and a half years. So we're doing more. Fiesta was born about 15 years ago, but I started doing them like 17 years ago. Over time, it's been a lot of events over a lot of years.
That's phenomenal. I mean, and the last time that I was there, it was jam-packed. Dominican Fiesta was like, I mean, I was like, wow, this is where everybody's at. This is where everybody comes on Friday nights. It's amazing experience. So Fernando, in 2019, Jazz and Dominicana was like one of 7 winners in the Global Blog Awards. And one of the prizes was the publication of a book, which you mentioned a little bit about earlier. But can you give us a sense of like, why did you decide to make the book like an immersive experience? Like, why was that important to you?
Okay. Well, first of all, the book had to be of the blog's content of the year I won, which is 2019.
Yeah.
I remember that year I wrote around 144 articles. So I said, man, if I turn the 144 articles into a book, like an encyclopedia. So I had, I guess like 3, 4, 5 years ago, before that, I had started to name my interviews instead of Jazz and Dominicana interview so-and-so. I actually said Jazz and Dominicana, the interviews 2015, so-and-so. So what I told them is I'd like to do, I had done 11 interviews that year. I'd like to do the interview only. And so they said, yeah, no problem. So because of the fact that they saw that the blog and everything was in Spanish, they said, we're going to trust your Spanish because we don't have any editors that can edit your Spanish. I said, that's not going to be a problem. I guarantee that 100% of the edition will be correct. As a matter of fact, I want to do it in English as well. They said, well, we can't translate it. No, I'm translating and I'm sending you the book completely edited in both languages, and you're not going to find any mistakes. Then I said, I'd like to actually do something more. I want to end every interview with a QR code as augmented reality. And they said, we've never done that on a book. So I sent them a model of what it would look like. Not only did they fell in love with it, they started promoting the use of AR in other writers after they did mine. The reason why was easy, because the book, had I written it only in Spanish, my base of readers would be Spanish readers, which would be, X amount of millions. So by then translating it into Spanish and English, my base would grow exponentially. That's almost the entire world that can actually go in there and read the book. But then the reason I started doing with the code was, I said, okay, what happens if somebody's reading the interview that I did with Juan Francisco Ordóñez, who's one of our best jazz guitarists from, for forever here in this country. He's a referential jazz guitar player and also within Dominican pop music as well, and rock. So if I did a QR, I could actually have whoever's reading it zap the QR with their phone and listen to their latest CD on Spotify or on YouTube and get an idea of who this guy that he's reading about. So that was the reason behind doing it. The English was to broaden the base of readers and to expose more readers to what's happening. Each book, the idea is to open a small window into the jazz scene in the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
So I started the interviews mixed. There's different actors in the jazz scene anywhere. You've got your musicians, but then you've got, in this case, was a mix of musicians and radio program hosts. Radio is one of the avenues of best promotion for jazz, always is. So they're an important part. So as the books have kept coming on, I've increased the pool of different actors. So I've been able to get educators. I've been able to get jazz producers of events or festivals. And so that gives a broader picture of what's happening here.
That's great. I mean, it's like you're creating this repository of history for those of us that are getting into the jazz scene here, but then, future generations, so they can see how just like the depth and breadth of jazz here in the Dominican Republic. That's amazing. And so do you have future books on the horizon?
Well, the publisher, Okioto Publishing Company, they liked that first book so much that they have since kept asking me. They keep tabs on my blog, so they've kept asking me to do more. So my second book was one that I had made a series called Women in Jazz in the Dominican Republic. So I was able to get 50 of the 54 women that had been or are involved in jazz at the time of the book, which was in 2020. So every year since, I've continued with the Jazz in Dominicana interview series. So I've now had a Jazz in Dominicana, the interviews 2019, 20, 21, 22. So there's 4 books there,
Yeah.
Women in Jazz 5, and Jazz in Dominicana, the interview series 2023, that should be coming out sometime in May of this year.
That's phenomenal.
So
how do you find the time to do it all?
When you love something, when you love what you're doing, it's like, there's no time. It's like, I wake up in the morning thrilled to see what the day will bring up and the ideas will, and because of that, I've been able to do one thing, do another thing, and get an idea for something else. Like, for instance, I've now been able to, over the years, take various Dominican groups into jazz festivals in the area, in Colombia, Panama, and in the United States. That was like something that I really wanted to be able to do, is to have other people see in live the jazz that's being made here in the country. I've been able to have my writings be published in other, not only in my page. I've been some of them have been reproduced, and some of my writings, I'm the only Dominican that writes in English in All About Jazz, which is the largest jazz webpage. I used to write regularly in Jazz Times magazine. On their page, they closed out what's called the community writer page, but I had done about like 17 or 18 articles for them. I'm the only member in the Jazz Journalist Association. So all of this has been geared to be able to promote jazz outside of the confines of the Dominican Republic. And that brings me to the latest venture that we've gone into, is that 4 years ago, we did an inter-institutional venture with the New Orleans Jazz Museum. So basically what we've done the last 3 years, they have a virtual jazz celebration of their celebration of International Jazz Day. Besides having their regular live concerts, they also have a virtual. So the last 3 years, I've been able to send Dominican jazz groups on video. They're all live recordings, but on video, and I've been able to jointly put together a program where it's New Orleans Jazz Museum and Jazz in Dominicana present their virtual jazz celebration of International Jazz Day. So this year, I've got 8 videos from 7 Dominican jazz groups that's going to be presented on May 1st. Why is that important? Well, it gives, last year was 10 groups, this year it's 7 groups. It gives these groups a stage where they can have their music be heard by the New Orleans Jazz Museum, which they curate the New Orleans Jazz Festival. But because of the fact that it's on their webpage and it's also on our YouTube page, and it's also being heralded by International Jazz Day, conceivably, their music can go out, I don't know to how many people. And so that it's a different way to promote, and it's a different way to have these groups be known. We have a lot of groups that don't have albums and CDs, and this is a way to get their music out there. Michael Camilo, as I mentioned earlier, he's got 25 albums. But if you take him out of the equation, Dominican jazz records are maybe not even 60 or 65 in the history of our jazz. So because of that, this is another avenue for that to happen.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful way of amplifying, you know, the talent, right? Highlighting the talent in the Dominican Republic. That's fantastic.
So you've got the music on the Jazz in Dominicana YouTube page. You've got the books available. These musicians now in their curriculums, they can actually say that they're in a book.
Yeah.
So you know, it's a way of being able to diversify and contribute more to jazz here in the country and outside of here as well. And
Fernando, if folks want to catch, and so at the end of this, we're going to be sure to share, you know, links to all of the different things that you're involved in. And if folks are interested in actually watching, you know, the New Orleans kind of like jazz festival, you know, where can they go? Is it just going to be on a website, or are you going to host a live event kind of like showcasing?
There's 2 things happening, one from New Orleans and one from Jazz in Dominicana. On New Orleans, on their Facebook Live and on their YouTube Live, they'll be doing the live presentations of all of what they turned that virtual day is. They have a lot of jazz archives, historical jazz archives. So they mix during the day, historical jazz archive. Oh, and here's Patricio Bonilla Band from the Dominican Republic with their song, whatever. So it's kind of like an entire day where they mix and match the presentations that I've sent. I think there's 1 or 2 presentations from another country, but there are only like 1 or 2. We have 8 this year. Plus, then the rest will be historical jazz archives, a Louis Armstrong concert from the 40s or whatever. And on the Jazz in Dominicana YouTube page, every half an hour, starting at 10 in the morning, every half an hour sharp, we will be premiering one of these videos until about
Fabulous.
2 in the afternoon. So
Okay, and this is on what day? May 1st, you said?
May 1st, yeah.
Okay, fabulous. We'll be sure to share that
Yeah,
as well.
we'll be sharing the link to that, and you can actually go into the Jazz and Dominicana YouTube page, and you can actually see that there are 8 videos to be premiered. And if you're interested, you can click, and you get a notification for each premiere, which will
Fabulous.
be very interesting. And of the tunes that are there, I think probably 5 are original songs. The others are original arrangements of known songs. So it's going to be very interesting.
I can't wait. I can't wait to tune in. Fernando, as our time comes to a close, we would love to give you an opportunity to share with our audience, what would you like, all of our audience, whether here on the island or in the diaspora, to embrace about jazz and what it would bring to their lives once they have opened their minds and hearts to its sounds?
Well, the first of all is Dominicanos know that we have a jazz that has nothing to envy of any jazz being done anywhere in the world. For ages, we have been proud of our merengue, of our bachata, of our song, because the song, and that's for some other time. The song is not Cuban. There's a Cuban song and there's a Dominican song. So we have to be proud of our Dominican song. So you'll have to study up on that too. But when we're able to bring in merengue, mangolina, pambiche, gaga, guloya, pri, which are all part of our historical native folkloric rhythms that are part of us and part of our history and part of our day-to-day, whether you're in San Pedro de Macorís with the guloyas, or whether you're doing gaga up in the hills, or what, all of this is now become a part of Dominican jazz. So we're playing regular jazz, but we're playing a jazz with Dominican accents. And that jazz with Dominican accents is what puts us apart from what's happening in Peru, or what's happening in the States, or what's happening in Europe. And we have to be proud of what's happening there. There's a lot of jazz players that have been, are, and will be present on a local basis, and now on international platforms, hopefully. And the being able to share our values through our culture via jazz is something that promotes our Dominicanism to the world, and promoting our Dominicanism to the world, our values, why we're such good-hearted people, why we always have a smile on our face, why we're always opening our doors to strangers, why we're always sharing our food with people that we don't know. That is very much needed in this world today. Yeah. And jazz is a bridge that allows us to be able to do that. It's part of our culture to be the way we are, and jazz can be another avenue for that to happen. To be able to put people from Canada, Germany, Argentina together on a stage with Dominicans, and all of a sudden there are no black or white or brown or yellow. There is no Spanish or Russian or German or English. There is no religion involved, whether you're Catholic or whether you're Buddhism or whether you're Jew. None of that exists, because everybody is living a perfect time where music and the essence of music is what pulls us together and what promotes what it should be. Right. Friendship, love, understanding, everything that we always read about as being the characteristics of good values. That's when you break down all those other walls via music and then share it. That's what a utopical society. Unfortunately, as we all know, once the show is over and people go back to their homes, they start going back to how they were before they came to the show. My wish is for people to take the show with them and live it longer. And instead of this Friday when it's over at midnight, maybe they can live this Friday until Monday morning. And then on Monday morning, they can think, oh, Friday's just around the corner.
Yeah,
And
continue to
Friday
extend it.
Friday,
Yeah,
and from Friday to Friday, the world, we can make a better place via music, via jazz, in our case, via our jazz.
I love that. Fernando, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your experience and your passion with us. I mean, your passion for jazz and your dedication to promoting, you know, this very vibrant art form in Santo Domingo have truly enriched the local cultural landscape. And, you know, I'm in awe of your efforts at managing a weekly live jazz venue, to showcase, you know, incredible talent, but also, as you just shared, like it's an opportunity to really foster a deep appreciation for humanity through music. So thank you so much for the significant contributions and for keeping the spirit of jazz alive and thriving here in the Dominican Republic. And we hope to continue to see how your endeavors continue to inspire and bring people together through the universal language of music. Thank you so much for your time with us today.
Thank you. And for what you were just saying, now you can imagine when about 4 years ago, it was 4 events a week. We had live jazz Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays.
Yeah.
So that was a hectic time, but I loved it. So anyway, thank you so much. And, you know, sharing the story with you, that's like extra incentive for me to tomorrow keep on doing what I'm doing. And you know how they say in the States, you know, keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
That's as long as I can do it, that's like I decided that was my mission in life, to do what I do for the benefit of all that want to take it as what it is, jazz in the Dominican Republic, jazz in Dominicana, and how jazz locally and our jazz internationally can make a mark on people's lives.
Yes, beautiful. Fernando, thank you so much.
Thank you.